Hey, well, good morning, everyone. Jeff DeVerter here. I am so delighted to get to spend some more time with you here today. And guys, it's going to be a fantastic show. I think you're going to really enjoy it. We are getting into, well, guys, it's all things containers this morning. But let's start with all the usual stuff, and that means it is time for you to introduce yourself in the comments. Wherever you're in the world you're coming in from, make sure you tell me who you are, and of course, where you are. It's going to be an excellent program today. If you've ever had questions about containers, well, I've got an expert who's going to be on the show for you today. Now, if you have any questions for us, you of course can put them in the chat, but also you can reach the whole production team here at the Solve program just by sending an email to solve@rackspace.com. And soon and very soon, you're going to even be able to text us as soon as producer Daniel figures that out. How about that, Daniel? I'll put you on the hot seat. And so feel free to send us an email in the meantime. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you'd like changed, maybe, or recommendations for guests. Anything you want to tell us. What'd you have for lunch? I'd be interested to know. All right. Well, with that, let's power into our morning. All sorts of interesting things. Of course, it always starts with This Week in the Cloud. And turn that off, push over to that, push that button right there. And guys, we are off to, our first introduction there. Duck Donuts on Heavner. Hey, we got a San Antonio person here. Isn't that fantastic? I would love a donut if you don't mind. I'm just over here in Alma Heights. Bring it on over. All right, so let's start with the news, my friends. And it starts with some news out of both Vmware and our good friends over at NVIDIA. And hey, Naveen Singh, glad you're here. Now, they're into an interesting partnership where they're bringing the power of NVIDIA into the VMware stack. Of course, VMware, they've just been around forever from a virtualization perspective. Good morning, Manish. And in fact, they make the statement that they are in 95% of all IT departments globally. Isn't that amazing? Could you imagine having 95% market penetration? Well, they've teamed up with the GPU owners in the world, and that is the folks over at NVIDIA, and bringing some of their AI capabilities to how they're handling things in the private cloud. So that's pretty cool stuff. As always, all of these articles will be available over at the Solve webpage. I'll bring a link up for you here shortly. Now, over at Piper Sandler's, they've got a super smart dude over there, and I bring this up because it's interesting. This is a CNBC actually video clip. We'll have a link to it. You can go watch it. But Brent Bracelin came on. He's a senior research analyst, and he's talking about how the cloud market expanding to 1.8 trillion by 2030. Can you imagine a market that big? And that is the place where we are. Linder's out on medical leave, and so it's all about Netflix for him and watching us here on the program. So, Dave, we're glad that you are here. Hope you're feeling better, by the way. Hey, and let's move on now over into cloud releases. You know, every time we do this program, I like to talk about an update from each of the cloud providers and where they're helping to not just make new tech, but in a lot of ways, make history, because this tech that they're bringing along really is that tech that is transforming the world. And it's a big part of why we do this program, because so much is changing so quickly that I think it's important to help bring that up for you guys. All right, so let's start with AWS, as we do normally. AWS launched a new AWS WAF, or Web Application Firewall, fraud control. Now, what they're doing here is helping to make sure that you can't have the dreaded account takeover problem. And so putting this in the WAF layer, which is the first layer coming into these environments, is super important. So that is a great security update from AWS. Make sure you implement that as soon as you can. Now, as we talk about breadth and depth and size and scale of these cloud providers, here's a good one over at Azure. Their OCR, optical character recognition API and feature inside of Azure, now supports 164 languages in their cognitive service computer vision capabilities. That's pretty huge. So again, what that's ultimately meaning is if you're feeding in an image, that image could have text from up to 164 different languages, and be able to convert that from the image into actual text that you can now use for search or indexing or however you want to use it. But 164 languages. Can you imagine? All right, let's jump over to our friends at Google. Some updates on their SAP capabilities. That for SAP NetWeaver, SAP now certifies Compute Engine General Purpose T2D. That's hard to say altogether there. Series machine types on the AMD platform. So continuing to expand their ability to run SAP NetWeaver in even more diverse types of infrastructure over at Google. All right, folks, if you want to get any of those links, I would encourage you to head over to rackspace.com/solve/92. This is episode 92. Can you believe that? Hey, welcome from India. I'm glad that you are here. Guys, continue to introduce yourselves. We're about to go down the containers rabbit hole here shortly. And if you've ever had a question for an expert in containers, well, save it for my guest who will be up here shortly. But before we do that, it's off to the job of the day here at Rackspace, guys. We are hiring like crazy. And today, in honor of the fact that I had an article about VMware, and they're one of our oldest partners, I wanted to tell you about our manager of technical support for VMware. This is a pretty cool job opportunity here at Rackspace, and it is a job that will provide leadership and direction for the delivery of pre and post sales for services and support to clients and customers, specifically with not just in VMware at large, but also VMware private cloud offerings. And so you can find a link to that job over at rackspace.com/solve/92. Of course, do not fear the dreaded sales pop-up when you go over to the Solve website. Guys, Solve is our thought leadership program at Rackspace. We are here to bring you information, not to sell you anything, but great ideas and education. And so if you head over to Rackspace/solve/92, all of the links for today, both the news articles as well as the updates, will be there, as well as a link to that job if you're a VMware leader. I'd love for you to come and work with us. We need some more help. Now, one of the things we started earlier this year was taking the audio from these live feeds and making them available as part of the Cloud Talk podcast. It's also why we rebranded the name of this to Cloud Talk Live. Now, you can find these podcasts anywhere podcasts are found. There's the list of them all down there. You can find links to all of these things at the rackspace.com/solve/92. I'm getting tired of saying that. So just head on over there, and I'd love for you to subscribe. Consider it a personal favor. We love the numbers. In fact, I get to sit in front of the CEO today and talk about the information that I get to bring to you guys every couple of days here on Cloud Talk Live. All right. With that, it is time for us to get into the conversation of the morning. And for that, I get to bring up an amazing coworker, and his name is Niketu Parekh. Now, Niketu's been here for a couple of years, but he's got lots of history in this space. He's a principal product manager for us here at Rackspace, all around the containers environment. So with that, Niketu, come on up on stage here. Welcome to Cloud Talk Live, Niketu.
Good morning, Jeff, and good afternoon, good evening, audience, wherever you are. Very excited to be here, Jeff. Really was looking forward to this opportunity to join the audience live and share thoughts about Kubernetes journey and anything about containers and their application to cloud native and multi-cloud technologies that all the customers are embarking on.
Yeah, so that journey has really been interesting. And as we were chatting a little before we got started, hey, look, we got a friend from Dubai in here. And glad that you are here, Yasser. Guys, continue to introduce yourselves, and as you have container questions, just pop them into the chat. Niketu is the smartest guy I know in containers. He can answer anything. And hey, Barbara, glad to see you too. So Niketu, as we get into this, why don't we start with a little bit of background? You know, we talk about containers. It's a very wide conversation, and I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about where they fit in that part of the digital transformation journey. You know, we talk, there's containers, there's orchestration. Why don't you maybe start to lead us down this path?
Absolutely. Sure, Jeff. Yeah, so first of all, when we talk about containers and container orchestration engines like Kubernetes, one thing that comes out without any ambiguity and without any debate is that it's the front and center or primary vehicle for any digital transformation we talk about, right? Uh, and in that context, we really need to uh, look back several decades of how application architectures has evolved,
Okay.
right? So, and to draw that analogy, I always refer to two famous Hollywood movies, The Untouchables. We refer to monolith applications as the Untouchables. So, if you can imagine, or anybody who has been around long enough, they would uh, directly correlate their personal experience that earlier in the days, those applications were pretty huge in size, very complex, and making any changes, etc., was a very lengthy process.
Well, it
So
was
when it
lengthy. It
comes
was
to
challenging. You had,
exactly,
everything. The whole thing had to be tested. It was, I love your analogy to the Untouchables because those monoliths. It was just, I mean, and go back, folks. I mean, imagine when we used to see updates even from Windows, and they would, be every 6 months at best, or,
yeah,
your favorite application. We're measuring this in many, many months, if not years, or at least quarters, just because the amount of work it took to start to peel that back and then test the whole thing to make sure the one line you changed didn't blow the whole thing up.
yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people will have gone through that first-hand experience. Making a, I mean, missing out one comma causes severe outages in the production environment. So,
It's
yeah,
that
so
level of attention to detail, which is why I'm not a programmer.
yeah. Anyway, so that's the monolith application architecture we're referring to, right? But when we talk about digital transformation, the most important aspect of that uh, transformation that has been enabled is because of the fact that we have this microservice architecture, right?
Yeah.
And that actually is completely on the opposite end of the spectrum. Because when we talk about microservices, another Hollywood famous movie is Fast and Furious, right? So immediately we can imagine that the capabilities and everything that containerized applications and microservice architecture has to offer gives faster time to deploy the applications, faster time to fix any bugs that have found in the production environment,
Yeah.
and results into lots of benefits that digital transformation is promising, right? So those are the two key architectural milestones that I wanted to cover before we dive deeper into conversation about containers.
I think that's good. Hey, let's. Javier's got a question in there that I think is quite pertinent. He says, if you have a container or a bunch of them running in Azure AKS, which orchestration platform would you recommend for on premises admin?
How about we take that answer a little bit later in the conversation, because I guess that
He's
requires
leading
a
the
little bit
witness,
of
isn't he? He's trying to get us to get to the punchline faster.
exactly, yeah,
All right,
yeah.
Javier,
So
you got to
that
stick with this. This is what they call the bait. It's out there. The answer is coming.
yeah.
All right. Well, so if those are the movies, whether it's The Untouchables or Fast and Furious, how do we get there? Let's talk about that process in getting there, or maybe even defining. What is a container? Is that standard unit of measure?
Right. Right. So microservice architecture, right? It's built upon this concept of containers, and like you mentioned, uh, it's a unit of packaged application, right? So not only source code, but everything about the libraries and dependencies, everything is pre-packaged
Hmm.
to the point that it gives a high level of portability. And that's actually one of the benefits of containers, right? Or one
Right.
of the most important benefits of containers, apart from several other benefits that we can achieve uh, through throughout the journey of digital transformation.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Portability is
Javier is running
something that,
in Azure, and all of a sudden decides that GCP is the way to go. Portable.
right?
You can just move those suckers right over.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where the portability that containers offer is just one aspect of it.
Hmm.
I think we'll when as we continue the conversation into uh, cloud native versus hybrid cloud versus multi cloud, we will realize how uh, the portability of container is a prerequisite for any kind of transformation we talk about.
Yep. Yep. All right. Well, so that's that portability aspect. Like I said, is one of those things that I find so attractive to the whole containers methodology. The other aspects, of course, less overhead, greater efficiency, faster application. I want to hone in on that for just a second. The faster application deployment. How is it faster to deploy or development? How is it faster to develop in containers than it would be in another environment?
Okay, yeah, so we can do the comparison, right? Virtual machines versus microservices
Yeah.
or containers, right? So when we talk about microservices, is basically we are breaking down one application into multiple microservices. So it immediately translates into breaking down the efforts involved in writing those applications or developing those applications, right? And with that, we are able to distribute the development efforts across multiple developers and get the momentum or accelerate those development phases for each of those microservices.
Yeah.
So that's the developer aspect of it, right? When we talk about other aspects of how faster application development helps is the fact that with that we are able to also dynamically and in dynamic manner we can deliver new features and capabilities of our services to the customer in much expedited cycles
Yeah,
compared to previous
just think
days.
about it. Everything's broken down into these component parts, and those individual component parts can be developed on, they can be fixed, they can be enhanced and deployed all individually without having to wait for the rest of everything to come along. So,
Right.
I hate to use the example, but it works so well. If you're co-editing a document, if you got a bunch of people working on one big document individually, someone's got to put it all back together. When you can co-edit in a document, rough analogy, you can actually do that a lot quicker. So I think that's one way to sort of think about that.
Right. Yeah, and other efficiencies, etc., that containers delivers also helps improve the service availability. So all the SLAs can be improved using container and microservice architecture. Also, in the same context of availability, when we experience any problems in the production environment, uh, recycling those containers or microservices is significantly quicker than the previous generation of applications, as an example, right?
Yeah.
And that definitely improves the availability. At the same time, it achieves better outcome for the overall disaster recovery strategy as well, right?
Right.
So, I mean, of course, there is endless list of benefits that containers has to offer, and that's why it is the primary vehicle for all the digital transformation, like I was mentioning earlier.
Well, it all can't be sunshine and roses. What are some limitations? Where do containers maybe not fit or fall a little flat?
Yeah, of course, it's not always uh, the hunky-dory story, right? So,
Right.
in terms of limitations, one important limitation that we probably will have to live with is that the underlying operating system, right? So, if I have applications which are running on Linux, unfortunately, they are not portable to Windows, and vice versa is also true as well. So until unless we make investment in refactoring those applications, we are kind of locked into that operating system level dependencies. So again, that's where the limit of portability ends. But again, that's just one limit. Uh, there are many other aspects, much broader than just the containers. When we talk about multi-cloud or cloud native journey that is part of the digital transformation.
Well, and it's good that you bring that back as well, because we really need to think about this as part of that digital transformation, that journey
Exactly.
to cloud native is because that's really where this stuff really starts to sing. So, I mentioned before how much I enjoy the portability, and it's one of my favorite features is the portability. So, why don't we zoom in a little bit on the portability of containers and some of those trends and how it enables some different methodologies as well.
Sure thing. Yeah. So when we talk about extending the portability beyond containers, we are immediately stepping into the realm of cloud native versus multi-cloud versus hybrid to a certain extent as well, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, if you ask 10 different people, uh, more than likely you will find different answers when it comes to the definition of cloud native versus multi-cloud.
Yeah.
If the applications which are born in public cloud, for them, cloud native is consuming everything that is native to public cloud provider.
Yeah.
Whereas if there is somebody who has a legacy application and they are going through the refactoring and uh, containerization journey for those applications, they will be looking at multi-cloud as something that enables them to deploy those services independent of what cloud service provider that they use.
Yeah.
But beyond that, there is still an important aspect of where making or achieving a higher level of portability, and that's where the cloud native services steps in, or the architecture methodologies of cloud native helps to achieve higher level of portability across various public clouds, and for that matter, uh, across all the types of deployment models, right? Whether it is private cloud or public cloud or hybrid.
Yeah.
So that's the essence of cloud native services. So I can give a reference or just an example.
Okay.
Right? When we're
Perfect.
talking about a caching service, right?
Hmm.
A caching service on Amazon, it's Elastic Cache. But at the same time, they are offering other managed services where Redis and other open source caching services like Memcache are offered as managed services.
Yeah.
Same goes with Google and Microsoft as well, right? So when we talk about use cases around uh, uh, a caching service that we need to consume as part of our overall full stack application,
Yeah.
we are talking about some nuances which are platform or providers dependent, right? So it's important to identify those and try to unlock those dependencies,
Yeah.
meaning that if I'm using a Redis uh, for my private cloud, I would prefer to maintain the same architecture when I'm migrating from private cloud to any other public cloud or hybrid cloud model, right?
Yeah.
So that is a level of portability that we need to think about when we are working on refactoring our applications. Or for that matter, if our disaster recovery strategy is leaning towards multi-cloud, achieving that high level of portability is important so that we are able to keep the disaster recovery cost to as minimum as possible.
Yeah, it's
So
one of those. Disaster recovery is one of those in the VM space. It was always so expensive. Everybody wanted it, but nobody could really afford it. But now that we break
yeah,
things down, it really actually makes it sort of possible. Hey, I wanted to say, Malkat, welcome, and Motaz, glad that you guys are here as well. And let's hit. We only have about 5 more minutes, but there's a question here, and asking about share a simple analogy, a real time scenario of microservices architecture. And I'll just shoot one out really quick. Imagine a shopping cart experience. You're trying to check out and buy the things that you want to buy. Well, we do know, of course, that drives. There are lots of different things you have to do on there, and one of the things is type your address. And every time I type my address, it always comes back and says, "Would you rather use this address?" Because what it does is it goes off and it makes a request and says, hey, the person entered this address. Is there a better formed one that the post service is going to be able to utilize? Now, that could be built into the whole code for the page, or what predominantly happens is that feature is its own bit of code. And the web page itself, in an asynchronous manner, is going to go out and say, while I'm still typing things, and go off and say, hey, they typed in this address. Is there a better one? And then bring that back. So it's a little bit of code that does a very specific thing and provides that information back. Microservices. How did I do, Niketu?
that's a perfect example in
Well,
terms
then
of
we're
how
done. We should leave
microservices.
right when you say perfect because I love the sound of that.
Yeah.
Hey, well, we only have a few more minutes left, and I know we want to talk about this whole path and journey out into the cloud native journey. So why don't you take us a little bit into there and talk about how we can actually go about doing that across public cloud, hybrid cloud, or even private cloud?
Sure. Yes, I think continuing the conversation we were having earlier, when we talk about emphasis on cloud native services, that's where we are able to get the maximum return on investment in terms whether it is uh, application development efforts or optimizing our operational resources to manage those services and keep them up so that we can fulfill the promises of SLAs that we have promised to our custom and users and customers. Right. So from that perspective, it's pretty important to identify those areas and uh, put some emphasis on use of cloud native services so that we are able to achieve the portability goals that we are setting up for any multi-cloud deployment model for the services, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did that answer the question, or
Yeah,
you want me
absolutely.
to?
Because it's all about this ultimate strategy of how do we get to cloud native, and that should be the goal. And I'll say for most applications, there are still some, you know, they may have a shortened lifespan inside of your organization. You're just trying to, let them live their life while they
Mhm.
while they can, and you've got a plan for where we're going to get that data or that compute in the future. So there are some workloads that maybe don't necessitate this sort of move, but Niketu, in large part, it seems like most applications should be on the roadmap for how they get modernized from a digital transformation point of view.
Exactly.
And the thing that's so cool about the container space is it doesn't mean you have to go to the public cloud. You can do this in a private cloud environment. And because of portability, move those things out and about. Now, we would not be cool if we didn't answer the question from before that we had around orchestration. So we have like 2 minutes left. I want to give you a chance to answer that.
Yeah. So when we talk about orchestration engine for containers, there should not be any debate. It is by far winner is Kubernetes, right? So when we talk about deploying it in Azure,
Yeah,
AKS is the answer because it comes with lots of capabilities and benefits out of the box. So deploying your own Kubernetes cluster using EC2 instances or compute on any infrastructure as a service offering from any public cloud. Uh, if you are doing DIY, certainly that's an option.
yeah,
But if you are on public cloud, then you have to leverage the benefits of the hosted Kubernetes services.
that's
There is a
right.
reason why they have made a huge investment. So strategically reinvesting in investing the efforts in reinventing the wheel probably is not the best option.
Yeah. Hey, there's one more question I want to try to grab before we close off, and that is security with containers. How do we go about securing containers? Now, it's a
Mhm.
pretty broad question, but
Very broad question, I guess.
yeah. In fact, we may
It
have
will
to save
require
going into detail on this one for a future episode. But
absolutely.
but broad brush it for us.
In terms of securing the containers, there are so many different options. You have the option to, again, if you are a DIY type of audience, you have lots of open source services available to leverage that and achieve certain level of container security posture.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are very mature and very comprehensive third-party tools as well from Equasec or Prisma from Palo Alto, Sysdig, New Vector. I mean, there is endless
There's a
list.
few.
So
There's a few
I
ways to go
al-
about it.
I always go back to the CNCF landscape, and whenever I go after a few weeks, I find out more and more vendors are added to those individual landscape sections. So security is again extremely fast growing area for from CNCF growth perspective,
Yeah.
and a lot of options are available. But like Jeff mentioned, we'll have to have a dedicated session talking about container security.
Yeah, in fact, if that's of interest to you guys, just make a note down in the comments, whatever platform you're watching us on. Looks like most are on LinkedIn this morning. Let us know. Just a yes, please for security. You can let us know, or good God, no. That's okay too. So, what more questions coming in? Niketu, can you stick with us for just a little bit while we answer a few more quick questions?
Sure thing.
Thank you so much. Can you name a few? So I'll take this next one. Some applications that I actually want to pick this question apart. The question says, can you name a few applications that can't be containerized and is preferred to use on-prem? So first of all, those are two separate topics. So whether something can or can't be containerized is one thing. But whether or not it is on-prem or not on-prem is another thing. Those are two separate conversations. I can leave something in a VM and move it into the cloud. That's fully okay. Infrastructure modernization, we might call that. But whether we containerize it or not, applications that come to mind that you can't, if you're using an off-the-shelf product that isn't designed for or architected for containers and you don't have the source code, you can't really kind of mess with that. Any other, Niketu, boundaries for applications that aren't ripe for containerization?
Uh, I would say the answer depends on the business goals we want to achieve, right? I mean, like
Always
you
goes back
mentioned,
to the business goals.
if you don't have the source code, then there is nothing we can do about it. But assuming that we have the source code, it could be a massive refactoring effort, which will be like several years long project to containerize some legacy monolith applications, but it's certainly doable.
Sure. And that
Except
goes
that
back to my comment before, is if that application is only scheduled to live for the next couple of years, it may not make business sense to dig into. Hey, rapid fire, next question. Marcy asks, how do you back up AWS containers? And that's sort of a loaded question,
again,
isn't it? Do you
that's a
actually back
loaded
up
question.
containers?
I was about to mention that you really need to back up containers. We certainly have various options, but when it comes to containers, I would say that depends on whether it is a stateful container application or a stateless, right? So if it is stateless, then there is absolutely nothing you need to worry about, because your source of truth is residing outside the Kubernetes cluster, right? So from that perspective, it's just a matter of redeploying your application if it is stateless as part of your disaster recovery, or what if you have to take any manual action to recover that application, right? But you don't really have to do any kind of backups. The backups are applicable only in cases where there is a stateful application, and then it will be dependent on the application itself as to how backups are supported, right? So if we are using any AWS native stateful applications or databases, those come pre-built with capabilities to take the automatic backups and everything. So that eliminates the need for us to invest integration efforts there.
Yeah. So unless it's stateful, you let the orchestration engine take care of it, and you rely on the cloud native capabilities to back up the data and be as resilient as possible. Very good, everyone. We stuck around a little longer. You had your questions, we had answers. So thanks so much for being a part of this conversation this morning, world. Glad that you are here. Hey, John from London is here. So John, we're about to be done, but go back and watch the whole thing. Niketu, thank you for being a part of this. I feel like we just scratched the surface, so we need to have you back. We have a security conversation to be had. There are deeper conversations to be had in and around the next step in transformation and what it takes to manage some of this stuff. So consider the door open to come back on Cloud Talk Live.
Absolutely, anytime, Jeff. I really enjoy this audience and opportunity to share my thoughts and learn whether my thoughts are aligned to other people in the community who are actively pursuing their cloud native journey. So
that's right. Everyone, thank you so much for being a part of the program this morning. We are back here on Thursday morning at 8:30. That conversation is focused solely on security. In fact, we're going to have some really sharp folks in from Cloudflare. We've got some sharp security rackers coming on for a really great conversation, and I hope that you'll be here. We start at 8:30 a.m. Central Time on this coming Thursday, so I hope to see you then. And other than that, have a great day. Go check out the rest of these links from this episode over at rackspace.com/solve/92. We'll see you Thursday.